From We First and Goal 17 Media, welcome to Lead with We. I'm Simon Mannering, and today I'm so excited to speak with Michael Muñoz, who leads diversity, equity, and inclusion within marketing at Google, and Reggie Butler, founder at Performance Paradigm, who's been advising top business leaders for nearly 30 years about how to create more deeply engaged leaders and teams. And today we're going to talk about some of the work they're doing together to bridge divides along the lines of race, culture, and gender, and specifically about their examined human and digital human platforms. So Michael and Reggie, welcome to Lead with We.
Oh, thanks for having us. I'm a fan of your work because you're putting good out in the world and creating sustainable change, which is certainly where I am aligned with, and as Michael is too. And I've been doing this for, like you said, 30 years, but part of the mission that people have started to realize over time is that if we make stronger connections with people, we can solve really complex issues. So thanks for having me.
And Reggie, let me push on that a little bit. So tell us, how did your journey lead you to where you are today? What work kind of trajectory were you on, and what role do you play today specifically?
You know, so let me start by, so Michael, remember when we first met, there were some things going on in the world, and that Michael, being the person that he is, he just sort of looked at me and went, we need to solve something. And we may need to be a little bit disruptive. And so if I think of the relationship I have with Google, through Michael, and I've been there for a while, it all started with someone trying to solve a human-centered problem.
Right.
And they need different people to actually be a part of that solution. Michael, why don't you tell them?
Yeah, Michael, tell us a little bit about your background and specifically the role you play inside Google. That'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm a diversity guy. I've been doing diversity in corporations like ESPN and EY and Aetna for about 20 years. But Google was appealing to me because I thought it was an opportunity for us to really change the game and change the way we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the opportunity to work with Reggie and, like he says, really challenging the status quo. Was something that we were really looking forward to doing, and I was excited about doing because, to tell you the truth, Simon, I was really tired of looking at data that said that people from different genders and races were having different experiences. And so in order to fix that, we needed to change the way that their managers and leaders were thinking about them in the organization, and therefore the behaviors.
So help me understand the process itself, because you've got this 12-week very intentionally designed course that allows people to have those, experiences, to reflect on it, to come back. What have you structured, or how did you structure it in a way that it would be different? Help us understand the pieces of that puzzle.
So I'm gonna go through one part of it. Michael, you take them through other things. So one thing we know that in our society right now, people, the way they consume content, we had to put it in a voice that was, that they wouldn't reject the premise of learning something this way. So if you think of any episodic feature, if you think of Netflix as a season, we built it in a season format. So there's season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4.
Great. I mean, we've all been trained over the last year. We're ready to binge watch the next season, right?
That's right. And so what we did, which was beautiful, is we did it. We created and still used art and all the experiential things to deliver it, but we wouldn't let them fast forward. We wouldn't let them binge. They had to stop and they had to go do work in between. And Michael, you can talk about some of the just behaviors you've seen change because of the work part, not because of the session itself. It was the work in between.
It's interesting. I mean, this sounds a little bit, I don't know, like a saying, but it's the silence between the notes that makes the music.
Absolutely.
It's the moments of reflection. So Michael, what have you seen in these behavior changes? You've got these well-compensated, people in a very privileged environment, one might say, in the Googles and Apples and Facebooks and tech world more broadly. What behavior changes have you seen as a result of this process?
Yeah. So first of all, we took a lot of heat when we decided to gate, and because people were like, I only have 3 hours. Let me just binge through this. What's been incredible, and it's to Reggie's team credit, because they said, trust me on this. They need to spend time in the work. Is we have folks that are emailing me, pinging me all the time saying, it's my Friday night, appointment viewing now. And it's their employment viewing because it helps them frame how they want to show up the next week,
Right.
the next one-on-one differently. It gives them another tool in their arsenal or in their quiver to be able to open up. And honestly, Simon, can you imagine this year being a manager to remote folks through everything that's going on, and to be able to have this tool that helps them frame, okay, this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to build. We talk a lot about familiarity, comfort, and trust.
Right.
And that's you could argue that's easier to do in person, but people are learning how to navigate that right now, virtually. People will say to me, and this is the important thing when I talk about the results. A lot of training I've done in the past centers the efficacy of the training on the experience of the people who have gone through the training.
Right.
A lot of what we're doing is centering the efficacy of the training on the people from underrepresented groups that report into the people that have been in the training.
Sure.
And so they'll call me up, they'll ping me, they'll say, I'm going to stay here a little bit longer because my relationship with my manager has gotten better. I don't know what you did to them when they went through the training. I don't know, but they're showing up for me differently. I feel like I have a voice. I have better psychological safety. And so making sure that we're centering on the experiences of the people whose lives and careers that are impacted has really made a big difference.
I mean, that's really powerful sort of social proof. And, one of the things I struggle with, Michael, is like, I look at the moment in time right now where we're coming out of, well, arguably, COVID to some degree, but, the reality is that we've all been polarized. We've all been forced to stay at home. We haven't seen each other. We've been working virtually. And so in a sense, when and if it happens that we all go back out into the world, this could be a watershed moment where we reweave the social fabric inside organizations and communities all around the world with a greater sense of diversity, inclusion, and equity. That's in the plus column. In the minus column it's hard not to experience this in any other way than punitive, like you've been doing something wrong if you've been someone who's been privileged or benefited from, the way things have been done in the past. And so they're on their back foot. So my larger question is this: how do you make sure for everyone that this experience is positive and not a chore they've got to get through or, a box they've got to tick inside the company? How do you reframe it where you go, wow, at this moment in time, with the support of this course, this can be something that can unlock enormous innovation and ideation inside of the company. It can fortify the culture and build resilience. This can be a huge unlock for you personally. How do you capture that tone?
Yeah,
I think it's. Go ahead.
Fire away, Michael. Fire away.
Yeah, no, I want, but it's part of what this is all based on is that we've got to move a person from being transactional about their job and the people that help get the job done to being transformative and human-centered.
Right.
So when people come through the training and they come out, they're more focused on their humans than they're focused on the project.
Right.
You still are going to focus on your project, your business. Of course you're going to do that. But I've had people anecdotally reach out to me and said, this is the first time I've ever thought about the people on my team by thinking about the people first and not the project or the output first. We were always going to get to the output, always. It's just
we've almost been commoditized ourselves as employees.
That's right.
We are a function of the projects and we've been dehumanized in a sense.
Yeah, and the thing that it leaves us with, and which is sort of the output of this, the meta output, is that we are trying to get people to care on their own without having to have something happen that causes them to care. So if you think of 2020, you think of COVID, you think of George Floyd, all of that, something happened that caused people to pay attention. And yet, even in that, there are still some people that aren't showing evidence that they care.
Right.
When you put somebody through an experience and you give them these levers to lean up against, like the tools and the frameworks, they come out and they say, not only do I care, I realize this is a lifelong change for me, not a part-time effort.
No,
that's the point.
That is the point. And everything you're talking about, the reframing to be human-centric, to really see each other as people first rather than employees or functions of a project, it is so powerful. Now, I imagine when you do this work, Michael, I'd love to ask you, every company is at a different point in this journey. So do you do an audit at first to see, A, where the company thinks it is, B, where they really are, C, where are those people, the 60 people that do a workshop, and where they are in their own individual journeys? How do you calibrate it so that you can meet them where they are?
Personally, I think it's an incredible time to recenter who we put, at the epicenter of what's working or not working for your organization. So for us, for so long, we look up at largely white men, and we decide, we ask them, we kind of use them as a proxy to understand how the organization is doing or on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The results, the impact of, I think, Black Lives Matter and kind of Me Too movement and the violence against Asians is that we have an ability, and I would argue the responsibility to recenter who we're putting at the as the arbiter of your organization's culture. Right. Now we can look at the Black, Latinx, Asian, indigenous populations and say, how are we doing at building a culture where you feel empowered, where you feel a strong sense of psychological safety? At Google, we talk a lot about a sense of belonging, and how do we build that? We know that there's a role that managers play in that, but at the end of the day, the arbiter of whether we're doing well can't be the white men that are leading the organization. It's got to be the folks that are in the organization that are experiencing the system, that are experiencing the outcomes of the system and the interactions with their managers. So I think it's a beautiful time for an organization to recenter how they gauge whether they're doing well or not in DE&I.
And I got to ask you both, I mean, if we're sitting around somewhere at a pub, having a drink, and I'd say to you, there's so many brands showing up and either doing public-facing statements as to their commitments to DE&I or JEDI, these different acronyms for diversity, inclusion, and equity. And there are those who are doing the heavy lifting internally. Is it different this time? Do you see people showing up on the strength of BLM and the continued violence against people of color and multicultural backgrounds? Do you think it's going to be different this time, and why? Michael, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I look forward to being in a pub with you or anybody. Let's
right.
hopefully we get back
Fair
there
enough.
soon.
6 feet apart, masks on. It's going to be great.
It's phenomenal. I think it's going to be really polarized. I think you're going to have a couple organizations that really get it, have a few leaders that are willing to invest in the resources, understand that this is a long-term effort. We're not going to fix this in 2021 or 2022 or maybe even in the 2020s. But you have to be willing to commit to the long term. And you've hired people to lead your organization who have the skill set and the discipline to be able to do that and shepherd your organization forward. There's another set, and I don't mean this in the most positive way, but who have hired people to be their externally facing person, or they've hired people who, are in sales to run, who are people of color in sales or in marketing or in other parts of the thing that don't have the discipline. They don't treat it as a practice. They haven't hired people who have built or cultivated cultures in other organizations. And in 2 years, when they don't see the progress that they've hoped to see, it'll be the first job on the the chopping block, and the culture will not change. Right. So I think we're going to see a really big divide, a chasm show up pretty quickly. And going back to who we center in this equation, we're going to see by how people move their bodies from company to a new company, how well companies are doing it. That should be the new barometer.
Sure.
Do you keep are you able to retain the talent that you have and acquire new, diverse, underrepresented talent moving forward? That's going to be the new barometer for us.
It makes a lot of sense, and I want to come back to that in a second, the sort of the business case for it. But Reggie, what do you see out there? I mean, you get the pattern recognition of working across different organizations and having that visceral experience of their employees and their teams. Do you think this time will be different, and if so, why?
Yeah, so I have to believe as an aggressive optimist that it will be different. Right. So I have to believe it. But what I am seeing across whatever industry I'm actually in is that this time is different because they witnessed a different event in a different way.
Right.
So to witness what happened in 2020 to your own families, you were there when someone was sick and then someone died. You were there when George Floyd was murdered. Like, you saw it on repeat over and over and over again. People are changing because their morality is staring at them, whether it's the morality at the individual level, the morality of a community. It's like things are being threatened, and people are trying to do what every species has done for centuries, is evolve and thrive. So yes, it's absolutely different. And what I think people are starting to get toward is, I don't have to be guilty for not trying as hard in the past, but I certainly can do more moving forward.
Yeah.
Because I can't do anything about that. I'm sorry it happened, or whatever thing you need to say about that. But there are a lot of people right now, and I'm witnessing it across every organization I'm in. There's somebody within the organization, somebody that's going, enough is enough.
Yep.
Like, I've seen it. I know what it's doing to my people. And while on my watch, it is not going to continue. And that's what
I agree.
I've seen over and over.
I think the universal experience that everybody's had and how it's played out so visibly and viscerally in front of people over the last year is unprecedented in some way. And I also think the younger demos coming through that really do look at life in a more inclusive way without the unconscious biases are helping. And I'm very optimistic like you about it, but it's also a long-term commitment and hard work. I want to ask you, Michael, being an older white guy myself, you often probably come up against resistance at a board level and so on, whether they articulate it or not, because they feel like they're being attacked or accused, or they're going to get some reputational damage, so they're on the back foot. So I want to ask you, how do you address that when you've got some resistance from at a board level or a CEO level? And then secondly, what business case do you make for them to say, hey, listen, this is a value add to your organization if they are resistant? So what do you do in that circumstance?
Yeah, so I really believe that everybody has a role to play. And I think that it's not my job to determine necessarily what your role is to play. I think you have that narrative already. And I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with this very senior leader, and I said, tell me about your diversity narrative. Why do you care about this? What does it matter what does it matter to you? And he said, hey, I watched this movie, and I went to school in Michigan, and we were super diverse. And I was like, I'm just going to pause you right there, because it was very clunky, and it was like very contrived, and it felt like he's giving me an answer that he thought I wanted to hear.
Sure.
And I said, let me just stop you here really quickly for a second. I noticed that you've moved 3 or 4 times across country in support of your wife's career, and she's a big director of a large hospital system. And I said, can I ask you, are you proud of that? And he said, I'll clean it up a little bit, but he said, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of that.
Right.
And I said, then that's your narrative, right? You have an opportunity to lean in support of, greater equality for women. And, you don't have to do this thing that you think I need you to do. We need you there too. And so I spent a lot of time with our leaders trying to figure out what makes them tick. What happened in their lived experience that is going to make them show up and use their organizational capital on behalf of somebody that doesn't look like them.
It's interesting. I'm hearing a theme where it's sort of like you're shifting the center of gravity time and time again, from the project to the person, from the professional to the personal, from the corporate narrative to the human narrative. So it's almost like you're kind of constantly reaching into people and organizations and turning them inside out and saying, come on, let's elevate the humanity. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that, you asked the second part of that question is like, why should they be doing it, right?
Sure.
Because, I fundamentally believe, people ask me all the time, why is diversity important? And for me, the answer is it's not. It's not important unless you've built a culture of inclusion, you've built a culture of empowerment with strong psychological safety. Because I can promise you one thing, Simon. Yeah. If you have an organization that has a lot of diversity and no psychological safety, no sense of belonging, that company either has currently or will soon have a retention problem.
Sure.
Right?
That's right.
And so you need to focus on the people first. And when we start to do that, when we start to do it consistently, and Reggie talks about this all the time, when you start to do it when times are tough, right? It's easy to do when it's, heading into holiday or vacation or whatever. But, when a project deadline is up against and you have to make that deadline, do you still care about your people? Do you still put them first? Right? And that's going to be the telling tale of how effective these managers and leaders are in their organizations.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, Reggie, something based on that. It's one thing to elevate this conversation, to humanize the experience, but none of this is happening in a vacuum. It's not like we've got a clean slate and nothing but opportunity ahead of us. There are still headwinds. I mean, the rising awareness of existing white supremacism in the country. And it's played out quite dramatically on the political front, but there are forces working against the type of goals that we're talking about here on this conversation. So how do you contextualize that, in this broader conversation? Because, it's complicated and it gets very emotional very quickly for people. Help me understand.
Yeah, some of it has to do with, I'm trying to get leaders to understand fundamentally not to be scared of the ambiguity and complexity that it takes to actually solve any of these issues relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
So I have a lot of people who sit in positions of power and influence that are afraid they're going to make a mistake.
Right.
And because it's so public facing, they don't want that to happen. I was like, well, then you're not willing to do what it takes to make progress occur. And every now and then I get a leader who goes, I'm not worried about the mistake because I have enough. If progress means I have to lose something so that other people can gain, then I'm going to do it. And what we're trying to push people toward is don't be paralyzed by the effort. Simon, you know what the credibility is in leadership spaces right now? Evidence of effort.
Right.
It's like, let me see you try. I don't care if you mess up. I care that whether or not I see you try. And if you're trying and it's coming from I want progress to occur, you get a lot of people that are having different lived experiences that are actually saying, at least I know I'm in a place with at least a leader or two that is showing me evidence of effort, and that will make me stay. So I think I also believe that the polarization that you talk about, it's been there for centuries, will continue to be there. The subjects will just change. What we need people to do is get involved and stay engaged, not part-time. Get involved, stay engaged. You've been through how many careers right now, and you're still engaged.
Sure.
That's the point. I need more of you at scale that want to care about what's happening, not now, but what happens next. And that's really different.
It is a long-term commitment. And how do you elevate it as a priority inside the organization? And I'm getting a little bit tactical about it. For example, a lot of brands have woken up the need to be more purposeful. And then you hear things like ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. And DE&I, diversity and inclusion, often sits within governance and social to some extent. I mean, how are you framing this work inside the business and brand priorities of organizations who are attuned to the larger conversation about capitalism, about business, about climate, about our future? How do you approach it from a sort of strategic messaging point of view? Michael, why don't you help us there?
I mean, one of the things we focus on is making sure that we represent our users authentically, right? And I think a lot of brands, a lot of companies have missed that. Or they throw a brown person with brown skin and into an ad, or they rely on stereotypes and everything like that. And I think we got to make sure that we are getting as proximate to folks, and by that I mean having folks that don't necessarily speak to the entire communities, but can give us a level of insight into communities so that we can authentically represent them in our products and tools.
Right.
So for us, that's a kind of a starter for us in terms of how we're thinking about the Google marketing and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I've seen it play out in a couple of other different ways, Simon. There are some people that when you look at scenario planning about the future of the business, one thing is always a common thread. What's the healthy way for our business to prosper and be relevant and make a difference to our communities? And sometimes I can get a leader to say, here's the things we paid attention to. We paid attention to climate change. We paid attention to green initiatives. We paid attention to that. And I always look at them and go, okay, what about your internal workforce and your people? Have you made that a priority yet? And they all go, of course we have. And I'm going, doesn't seem to be that way.
Right.
Because you haven't shown not just the evidence of effort, but you haven't shown the investment at a level where there was a return that your people think that you made it a priority. Because I believe there's a lot of leaders who are making it a priority, but the messaging and the signaling that occurs is falling on deaf ears because they can't see the progress. So you have to prioritize not only the effort, but the message along with the effort to let people know we are doing something.
You know, I want to ask both of you, Michael, if you're talking to an executive, they could be a founder of a small company with a relatively small staff, they could be a high growth company, or they could be a very complex enterprise. What is the first thing you would say to them as to why they should invest in this work and how they should think about it? What is that starting point that might trigger them to go, you know, this is a necessary step I need to take?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I think that one of the things that we want folks to do is put their people first, right? And understanding that they need to empower their leaders, hold their leaders accountable in a way that uplifts them and really takes them into a place where this isn't compliance training. They're doing this for the intrinsic value, and because of that, everybody's going to benefit from it. Right. I believe that right now, one of the best catalysts is that most people really want to do better, right? Yeah. They want to be a better leader. They're like grasping at straws for resources, right? But they also need to be freed up to be the human beings that they can be. And so this training, giving them the opportunity, giving them the frameworks, giving them the shared experiences is going to catalyze and free up these teams. You talk about diversity and innovation and creativity. Imagine when everybody's working well together. That's that sweet magic sauce that is going to unlock the innovation, unlock the creativity that we've talked about for years, right? So this training is really about giving them the tools to be able to do that, the shared experience and the freedom and the latitude to make some mistakes because they are doing that, showing evidence of effort. That is going to allow them the latitude to be able to not have that pressure to be perfect at all times.
Michael, so first of all, applaud yourself, the human, for taking on the hit to try to get something like this to happen. And Simon, the reason I say that is there are a lot of people in organizations that won't take the risk. They're just paralyzed by the risk of what if it doesn't work? And it's like, no, somebody's got to take the risk. So you can create traction and momentum. And I remember in one of the sessions, because Rich Dialogues is a part of it, somebody came out and said, I had a conversation with somebody black on my team, and it was the first time I heard that it's because of me, their manager, that their life is different. And I never view myself as that. I'm just a normal person doing things. Like, no, it's because of you. Like, if you didn't check in on me, if you didn't speak to me, and I don't mean like say hello, if you didn't notice me as being human, if I weren't visible to you, I would have left a long time ago. Because I am dealing with a trauma, my community's dealing with trauma, and there's a bunch of workforce studies that are out there now that are supporting this. The one place people want to be able to talk about who they are and what their experience is, they want to be able to talk about it at work with those people. Sure. When you have that context and that construct set up, amazing things actually happen because you're bringing people together. Because I truly believe this for leadership capabilities. You have a job, you're always supposed to help others. And if you figure out what that looks like, it's going to look different to different people. But you're supposed to be bringing people together, not leaving people alone. So helping others and bringing people together, that's what your job is. On any given day, I don't care what the business performance is. Way too many people spend time and they go, I need to look at my business performance. I need to make sure we're healthy. I have a healthy organization, healthy business, profitable, all the things. And I just look at them and go, when are you going to make one of your targets, one of your goals, human performance?
Right.
Like you look at business performance really well, and man, you can you can interrogate that and make sure all these process improvement things are happening, but do that with the humanity that is in front of you called your workforce.
I mean, and it's the biggest line item on your P&L. You invest in it every day. People walk in the door or they log on and log off nowadays. I mean, how can we not invest in that? And I want to end in a sort of expansive note. You know, we're slowly embracing the responsibility of this conversation and behavioral change and so on. But from both of you, I'd love to hear just how far can this go? What is that promise when you really do embrace it? How much can you transform an organization? Like, Michael, you know, if you could really just cast your eye down the road and say, in the spirit of aggressive optimism that Reggie mentioned, what is possible when you really do this well?
You know, I the other thing that Reggie and I bond on is this optimism, because I don't know. And I think that's the beauty, right? We don't know what the possibilities are because there's so few environments, work environments that exist that enable that creativity, that enable ideas as they're thought of in people's heads who are Black or brown or trans or othered in some way, to get out into the world, because we haven't created those atmospheres, those environments where, you know, I can conceive of something as a, you know, Puerto Rican Jewish diabetic, and it gets into the world without somebody, you know, muffling it or changing it or scripting it in some. So that's the possibility that I don't even know that we, like, the optimist in me doesn't know that we have a firm grasp of yet.
I love that. We don't even know what's possible when we deeply connect and celebrate everything each of us bring to the table. Reggie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what's possible is if I could get people to stop trying to make seismic changes and do individual changes, and everybody decided to do that, the possibilities you cannot calculate. And I view it this way. If I can save a life, it mattered. And I think people are trying to save like entire generations and populations, knowing I can never be able to do that, but I can save one. I can save one life. And and again, I'm taking this from, you know, a conversation that a leader had, and he said it was quite telling to me when I heard about saving a life in correlation to a car accident. So Simon, think about this. If you're about to get on a highway on an on-ramp and you can see the traffic is slowed down and you can tell up in your view that there's an accident or something, what do most people do when they see that accident and you're on an on-ramp trying to go somewhere? Most people get super frustrated. It's like, oh, you know, I'm gonna be late. You immediately make it about yourself. Immediately, I'm gonna be late. The closer you get, imagine this, the closer you get, you start to notice that it's a pretty severe accident. It transitions from I'm going to be late to I hope everybody's okay. Now, let's say you get almost parallel with the accident and you see people, meaning there's someone in the accident, you can see them, the more of your humanity starts to come out. It's like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to be helpful? You know what the difference is between the past and, you know, racial unrest and all these kind of things is that because of 2020, people were parallel with the accident and they recognized the person. And when you recognize a person, you don't just drive off, you stop, you get out, and you do what you can in that moment. And this leader looked at me and went, all I'm gonna do is spend my time making moments matter when I can. So I have to look for it first and not be frustrated that it's taking time away from my day or my life. And actually, to Michael's point, call in to be helpful. I think it's so powerful that the possibilities, and I'm not using that, possibilities are endless. Possibilities are real, but you have to care and you have to get involved.
I think that's so powerful, and it's so true, that sort of analogy you shared there. You know, this humanity is innate within us, and it's just about unlocking it and living it and bringing it to our work and to our teams. It's so powerful. You know, Google sponsored and funded this program, you know, Enlightened Human and Digital Human, Michael. You know, when somebody wants to go and find out more about the program and really wants to level up their teams and their organizations, you know, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, so they can... Go ahead, Michael.
No, no. I was going to say, first thing they can do if you want to learn more about Examine Human, they can go to YouTube. We've built a video about the making of Examine Human, and they can learn a lot more about how it came to be, what exactly it is, because it's really, really hard to describe it to anybody until you see it. So it's about a 6-minute video to check out what Examine Human is. And Reggie can talk a little bit about Digital Human and where you can find out more about that.
And we'll include the link to that video in the show notes. So that's fantastic. Thank you. And Reggie, what about Performance Paradigm? Where can they go to find out about the course and how
you
they
can
get
go to
involved?
the Performance Paradigm website. You can also find that same video. And there are other videos there that sort of talk about equity, inclusion, diversity, and leadership as potential solutions, especially rich dialogues, which a lot of people want to use right now to help build stronger teams and to skill people up. So you can go to my website for that. The other thing is that I would suggest, and this is for everybody, because the world is consuming things like you're delivering right now, Simon, podcast, there's so many resources out there right now of people offering really awesome solutions for how people can get involved and stay engaged. And I'm saying all of you, pay attention to podcasts. There's a ton of information that you can learn where you're doing your own pre-work versus trying to learn about the experiences of others by burdening the others by asking them what it's like to be them. There's a whole other way to do that. So visit my website. I've got it's called Care More Podcast, and I try to do inspirational things for people to have positive messages. So there's a lot of ways to get in touch with us, YouTube, our website, and things. But I really thank you for having us and allow us to amplify our voices.
Well, thank you for the fresh thinking, the disruptive approach, and the true passion for this topic at a time when it's needed more than ever. So, Michael, Reggie, thank you for your time, and I would encourage everybody out there to go and check out these programs because they make a truly transformative difference. So, thank you to you both.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Lead with We. You can find out more information about Michael and Reggie and Examined Human and Digital Human in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to this channel here on YouTube by clicking the red button below. Lead with We is produced by Goal 17 Media, and you can also listen to each episode on Apple, Google, or Spotify. I'll see you next week, and until then, let's all lead with We.